Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum bum
Oh,
bum
mate,
bum
I'm
bum.
bum.
Man, 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 bum 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 bum.
Go on, let's join in. Money, bum. Bash Bros.
So make sure you subscribe to our channel, Bash Bros, for more content.
Make sure you like and subscribe and put those notifications on.
Or the booger man will get you.
I'm not fucking about. Oh,
Hey, what's going on?
here he is.
I made it. All right. Sorry I'm late,
man.
guys.
Thanks for coming. Literally messaged you on like a dream. I was like, fuck it, YOLO.
Yeah.
What gonna do? He can just tell us to get fucked, and that's the worst that can happen.
I'm here. I wouldn't do that.
Oh, mate, wicked.
With us, it seems to have worked really well for us that we've managed to get some really good high-profile guests like yourself.
Yeah.
By winging it, like we just shot in the dark and it works.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I think that's what's really good about the bodybuilding community is that people are willing to help each other out. We've still got that thing that loads of other industries don't have. I remember I'm a music teacher and I tried to get some music people to come when COVID was happening to just do like a talk or anything for the kids because they were all at home and they were like, yes, 800 quid for an hour. And I was like, cool. I mean, I've got about eight pounds in the world. You can have that. But the bodybuilding community, like everyone's up for it. It's wicked. Big
hell yeah. Why wouldn't I want to talk about muscles, man? It's a pretty easy gig.
Guess what just happened? I pulled a shaker out thinking it was clean. I filled it up and no.
Oh God.
Just culturing some of your own probiotics in there, that's all.
Hey.
Yeah.
I told you about when I picked that guy up who was drunk, and when he got in the car, I thought like he's my dad's mate or something, and he was fucked. So I had to get him home because I couldn't walk home. And he got in the car, and I thought, oh man, he's shit himself. Like he's definitely shit himself.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I dropped him off and was like, oh God, I have a look in the seat. Like hopefully it's not gone everywhere and stuff. You know, we'll never talk about it again.
Yeah.
And I was like, it still stinks. Like he's gone, but it still stinks. And actually, all he'd done is knock the top off a shaker that must have been there for about 20 years.
It was me.
It was that bad. So I just set fire to the car.
Yeah, that's what you gotta do. Pretty much burn it, and that's that.
Well, the car is done.
So welcome back to Bash Bros podcast. This week we are missing two of the presenters, or how would you say, hosts. So we've lucky enough though to have probably one of our highest profile guests, Joe Bennet from across the pond, Hypertrophy coach, as everybody knows him. So what I'll do quickly, Joe, for those in the UK who don't know you, and if they don't know you, they should probably stop watching this podcast. But
stop life.
If you're not following Joe, head over, give him a follow. He's the main staple to anyone who wants to know about how to train in the correct way. But if you want to go over, get some tips and tricks, you'll always learn something if you visit Joe's page. So head over.
And it does have a subscription site as well. Plug it.
Exactly that. So we'll give you the opportunity to do that now, Joe. Just so what we normally do with our guests is ask for a little rundown. What got you into the sport? What the sort of the rise to your current position is, and what gets your motor running, basically, pal.
Yeah. I don't know how to do this quick, so I'll do it as quick as I can. But I don't know. I mean, it's funny how growing up, my parents played sports. My dad was big in sports. So same as a lot of people, just loved sports and was pretty competitive. And my dad's the guy that's probably been doing the exact same workout in his garage since the 60s, and he's still doing it now. And so we always had like a bench press in the garage, had the ones with like the weights filled with sand and shit. So I remember like messing around, just benching and curling in my garage, not having any idea what I was doing, just wanted to hang out with my dad. And then I really kind of remember getting some clarity and realizing that like bodybuilding was a thing. My brother, who's 2 years older than me, had Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. And so I literally remember like seeing that, and like the first time like opening it up, just being like, holy shit, like people look like this. And So that was really the first thing. I mean, I literally remember reading that thing, cover to cover, just looking at all over the pictures, and just again, something like clicked in my brain. And something clicked with me as well too, because especially the way that Arnold did stuff, he was a lot of just do a lot, right? So if like an hour is good, 2 hours is better, 2 sessions is good, 2 sessions is better, eat a lot, train a lot, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of always was definitely geared a little bit more towards individual sports, more so than team sports. I played a lot of team sports growing up, but as I actually had more choice and kind of figured out, oh, what do I like? I caught and always went more to individual sports. So something really appealed about like, it's all on me basically. And so I literally, I think I messed around a little bit. I remember my dad taking me to the gym before I could drive and shit, but I really went, crazy basically as soon as I had a car. And literally with my family, I think they all thought I had like mental problems. Like I literally would like buy I had every single like flex, muscular development, like every single magazine for probably I had them probably for like 2 decades straight. I would literally work out in my school. I had a weightlifting class I found I could take. So I would train during school. I would train after school. I had a job, and then I would pay for a gym membership, and I'd go train again after my job. And so most of high school, I trained 3 times a day. I had no idea what I was doing as far as recovery is concerned. I mean, obviously just between like the normal, in high school schedule, I didn't sleep much. I just ate whatever the hell kids eat when they're in high school. So I joke, like when I graduated, I probably weighed 150 pounds when I was 18. And as this height, I'm like 5'11". So I must not even look like I worked out. I must have just had like toned up bones at that point in time or something. But but I was just I love training. I mean, that was definitely my passion. I like just like everything about like, I liked endurance sports before, where you're like pushing through like pain barriers and shit. So I like going to the gym and just being competitive with training partners, trying to hurt each other, just doing stupid shit. I injured myself more before 20 than after 20 for sure. And then in college, I mean, in my room, that's the joke. One little side tangent. In my at some point in time when I was 17, 18, I bought a bench press, like a full set bench press for my room. And we didn't have a big house. I had a tiny ass room that literally all it could fit was like a single bed and a bench press, to the point where like when I would roll out of bed, the first couple of times I hit my head on the bar. And so like if you came in my room, I had this bench press set up and I had socks over one end of the bar. So when I rolled out, I didn't like hit my bench. And I remember the funniest shit about that is my dad was pissed because he's just like, it was expensive. And he's like, this is ridiculous. He's like, you got a room that's literally a bed and a bench press. Is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. But I was like, well, it's my money. He's like, well, we'd argue it's his house. And the funny thing is he still has that bench press. That's what he uses to train on now in his garage. So yeah, bench press isn't so dumb now, man. It's lasted 2 decades. And but anyway, I can't, if any of the stereotypical dumb shit you can think about too, like bro shit, I did it, like carrying a jug around school. Like, I couldn't go catabolic, so you got my branch chains and shit. And I remember I'd come into class. This is how much of a douche I was too. I would come into class, like write on the board, like my PRs that day. That was my first logbook. I would come to the front of the class and I write on like bench press, like 185 times 9 or whatever. And people were just like, what is wrong with this kid? I was like, not everyone's into working out. I don't get it. And so I could probably write a book of just like dumb meathead shit that I've done as well too. And then college was when I probably actually first started to get results, because I realized like recovery was important. So I started like sleeping a lot just because it's college, you don't have shit to do. And I ate a ton. That was the biggest thing. I mean, I probably just did the whole stereotypical. I would eat as much protein, the Arnold thing. I eat as much protein as I could at every meal, and then just whatever fit on top of it 6 times a day. And my freshman year, I went from like 150 to like 185. And I mean, I got a little mushy, but it was a lot of solid tissue at that point in time. And same thing, I was obsessed. I would train twice a day. There was a dungeon gym that everybody knew, like, because I went to University of Florida, big university over here. And great school, but they have crazy awesome gyms. Like they have way too much money, and like they had really nice gyms. And I didn't like the nice gyms because they were filled with really hot girls. And I really like working out and I really like hot girls, but I'm shitty at both when they're put together. So I would intentionally go to this dungeon gym that was literally it was stinky. It was like under a stadium. It was all like the hand-me-down equipment. And people thought I was nuts too, because that gym, the hours that it worked were from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so I would literally, as soon as I get off of class, I'd be right there at 2 p.m. First session would be an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'd like ride my bike back. I'd slam some food. I'd get showered up. I'd do some work or whatever shit. And I'd come back and I'd be at that gym till it closed every single night. So I did 2 days all the way through college. And again, that worked great for me when I was sleeping and eating. And so I was business for a year, pre-physical therapy for a year. And then my last 2 years, I finished with an exercise science degree. And I tell people I finished with that degree because it had the words exercise and science in it. And so I figured that was a safe bet. I was like, well, I like exercise. And if I can combine it with a grown-up word like science, then I'm going to have like a job when I get out of school. And so literally I got an internship in corporate wellness, which I found out real fast is not for me. And I met somebody at that point in time that said, hey, work for a company that had like kind of like in retrospect, had a really, really good training program, had like basically a place for career trainers. I'm actually really lucky. I got around some people that really taught me the business of personal training. I literally started because my wife had got a job in the area. And I was like, well, shit, I know how to train. I'd done a little personal training in college. And I was like, oh, I know how to train people. I'll just do this and make some money while I figure out what a grown-up's supposed to do, you know? And so literally I got this job and figured out real fast. Again, kudos to some really good mentors there that basically taught me like this, you know, profession is as respected as you make it, you know, because I just had this vision. I'd always train in Golds and World gyms and shit like that. So all the trainers there were guys like just wearing fucking stringers and like just making enough money to pay for protein. I didn't know at the time, probably enough money to pay for their cycles and shit. And just unprofessional, you know, I'm like, you're training somebody, their fucking nipples are hanging out and like you see their armpit hair and shit. I was like, yeah, it's real professional. That demands some high dollar personal training monies there. And so that was my perception of training. I was like, well, I can't do that. I'm like, I gotta be a grown up and have a grown up job. And so anyway, I got really, really into like the business side and really learned the ins and outs of how you can actually, it's your own business, how to manage your own business, manage your own clientele, all that kind of stuff. And got really into that for a couple of years, managed from that point, like the first 2 years I was a trainer, and then probably for about almost a decade for different companies, I managed training departments. And during that time, you know, my passion always stayed like bodybuilding. You know, at first I started training like normal clients, but I always gravitated towards training people that were in better shape. Like my joke is my ideal client was always the people in the gym that were in like the best shape. And I was confident that like, because I don't consider myself super genetically blessed, I always really had to like think to actually produce some results. And that actually works really well for most people, right? Like Phil Heath is not your ideal client. Like, you know, he's never asked anybody for tips on how to grow arms. But for normal people, it's like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to, you know, get big very fast. And so maybe some of that stuff will help me as well too. And so anyway, I always was pretty confident with my training. I always just trained, like I said, fit people, and just slowly started working in with my first couple competitors and more bodybuilders. Around, I don't know what year it was, probably about 2010, I really started to get into continuing education because I was always had interest in that. But I'd focused on the business side for a while. I had pushed as much information as I could out of mentors where I was working. And eventually they said, man, you gotta go get some on your own. Basically, we'd say, we don't have time to like answer all your questions all day long and shit. I'm like, well, I'm trying to learn. They're like, you know, there's continuing education thing exists out there. Literally was like a light bulb when I was like, oh shit, like trainers can like learn stuff. All right, cool. And so I went, that started me, I got really deep into a lot of Paul Quinn stuff. So I went to at least, you know, maybe 6-10 different Paul Quinn courses, started to really get big into RTS stuff, MAT stuff, a couple other ones, what's the other one called? Functional anatomy seminar stuff. So anyway, I kind of made a commitment in 2010. That's how people kind of like, oh, well, when did I turn from predominantly, if you knew me, like meathead for the first, I don't know, 10 years of my training. And then some people will see now like, oh, this is like that nerd guy. And I was like, well, I kind of got into the nerd stuff in 2010 and just committed myself to getting at least 2 certifications or go to 2 seminars every single year. And I've stuck with that from that point on. And then as far as like in the bodybuilding world, I kind of got where my first job was at. I was actually knew a couple pretty good bodybuilders, pretty good amateur bodybuilders. I worked with a couple guys before anybody knew me from social media or whatever. I worked with Anthony Pasquale, who was a high level NPC guy, should have turned pro, but kind of dropped out of a show right before he was about to do it. He would have turned pro, not that it matters. I was also actually pretty good buddies with Jason Huh. So pretty interesting. The small area that I was at in Florida, not a big city, is where Jason Huh grew up, and it's where he's still at right now. So I was always kind of talking shop with him. And when he was actually competing and kind of in his prime, I literally saw him like 1 or 2 days, probably 2 or 3 days probably before he actually turned pro, like doing his last posing round was at a little gym that I used to train at. And that was just fucking nutty. So anyway, I became good buddies with Ben Pekulski probably in, let me think when that was, 2012 or something. And so I became training partners with him. So really when I kind of got more into like, you know, getting around more bodybuilders and stuff. And I was training partners with him for probably 2 years before he was opening MI40. And basically had conversations with him about coming to help him open that gym. And so I was up there with him for probably 6 months before that gym opened. I spent all my savings helping get that gym open, basically float myself. and I was there for 2 or 3 years. But that's when I started, everybody talking me into doing social media. So that's when some people started to have some idea who I was, and basically just started talking about training and muscles and shit. And some people seem to like it, which is cool. And I've trained with a lot of really awesome people from that time forward. And the past couple of years, I've been doing my own thing, and that's where I'm at now. I think that's kind of caught up. That's as quick as I can get it, glazing over some stuff, but.
Fair play to you. That was that must have been difficult to narrow that down into such a short period. But so in terms of, so off the bat, we got I reckon in excess of 70 questions to ask you.
Yeah.
First and foremost, for myself, I just wanted to know who's been your favorite person to train or coach. Just for me, that's the rest. I'll stick with the other questions.
Man, I honestly don't know. It probably like a multi-person answer, to be honest. Cause like there's been a ton of people, there's been a handful of people I'll answer that I've been really excited about just for like different reasons. I mean, so off the bat, Dallas was awesome. Dallas for sure is one of my favorites. Just one at first, not knowing him, honestly, just because of his potential. And obviously he's still probably the biggest bodybuilder I've ever seen in my life in person. And so I was really excited about the potential, but he was just so like friendly and down to earth, like right from the first couple sessions, like open-minded. Because, you know, a lot of people don't know how stuff like that works, where it's like people like, oh, here's this hypertrophy coach is just going to like make this guy do a bunch of shit with pink dumbbells and cables. And it's like, no, I mean, I always ask people like, what do they want to train? And I was like, do we want to just go through your workout and just, you know, tweak some stuff that you're doing? And Dallas was like, no, man, just take me through something. I just want to see whatever. And so he was very open-minded. Like, let's just go through a workout. Let's just talk about some shit. And so just honestly, from an experience of like, you know, one, it's definitely fulfilling for me to work with a high-level athlete, but I'll never work with someone repeatedly that's like a dick, no matter how awesome they are. And so he is a really just like genuine, super nice guy. And then honestly, like I don't have a whole lot of like hobbies and shit. Like my hobbies are, you know, I have my family, which is not a hobby. It's the most important thing to me. And then literally it's the hobby. I'm going to quit it tomorrow. That's a good deal. No, but so I have my family, which is the priority for everything. And then my only hobby literally is like, especially that time, is the gym and working out. And so like you'd imagine, obviously, like you said, like the bodybuilding community's just really cool, man. So like Dallas is one of those guys that there are lots of times, obviously, we're doing specific things or working on something. But the majority of the time after the first few times we worked together was just a, you know, good guy to hang out with. It's just about as fun as it gets for me when we're training together. And then you know how it is. You're not doing shit afterwards. I literally sometimes have days when I'd go over there driving from where I live to just go train with them. And then you just like hang out and eat and be lazy and watch stupid shit on TV and chill out. And I don't know, man, that's just, it's fun stuff. It's little stuff like that. I valued at the time. I value it more now. You know, I've Dave, so anybody doesn't know, I trained Dave Batista, and same thing, one, just from a high level athlete. I enjoy working with people that are fucked up too, you know, so he's had, I don't know, half a dozen major surgeries, like muscles reattached and shit like that. So he was super fun just to work with as far as a challenge, and actually getting like a lot of like benefit of like having him have workouts that felt good for the first time in like 2 decades. And then same thing, he's just, for me, like one of the nicest, most genuine people that I've been lucky enough to hang out with. So from just somebody like both of those guys, I mean, they just work their ass off. Really, really nice, genuine people. And also like from a skill set, like those are fun people for me to work with, where there's a component of they need something from me, not just like, oh, let's just do this same cookie cutter shit. And then, you know, the other people that pop up, I always think from like hard worker standpoint, everybody works hard. But I've trained Michaela Aycock a couple times. I've trained Dana Lynn a couple times. They're probably 2 of the hardest training individuals I've ever trained as far as what they can tolerate. And same thing, just like good people. But those are people who are literally, they're probably the only 2 people, whereas I'm training them, I'm kind of like almost like I'll deviate from the plan. It's like, fuck, I got to just think of some extra shit to like fuck these people up. Nobody ever makes it to like a 3rd round. God, they're not like dead yet. And but I also like, I honestly, from like my own, you know, edification, I probably like training them too, because they also give me like compliments that I remember. Like I literally have both of them tell me, like, you're the only one that's ever like made me train that hard, like ever. And I'm like, all right, sweet. Like, that's what I'm going for. Like, if the hardest training individuals, I can find extra levels out of them. And then I'm just lucky enough too to like, I mean, I love training with Terrence every day. And again, it comes back to obviously one of the best physiques in the world. But I joke too, man. It's just I like laid back, normal people. So it's like I wouldn't be able to tolerate Terrence if he was just some weirdo or something. Where it's just like honestly, we're completely comfortable just hanging out. Like we'll have sessions, I joke, where we'll just talk about shit nonstop the whole time, or we'll literally have sessions where we say probably like 4 words, and it's not like we ever have like awkward silence of like, hey, how's the weather? Like, tell me about blah, 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 dumb shit. And so those are probably some standouts. I mean, there's probably a couple more. I don't ever really think I'd say like, oh, this person's like my favorite. Like everybody has like some specific things like I really, really enjoyed about training them.
Yeah.
And I've honestly had very few people that I work with. There's not something. I mean, like you said, it's like I'm living the dream job. Like I love all this stuff. So even if I didn't know what the hell I would be doing, it's like, oh, sweet, I get to train with this cool person.
Yeah.
And then honestly, I put a lot of time and effort and take pride in, you know, having some nerd shit or whatever, but actually letting that translate to like, I really want to like give people good sessions, like take it to whatever level they need to get to another level, whatever that looks like, whether it's just finding a different level of hard training or they need something specific or technical or whatever it is. So I pride myself in that. So it's like, that's for me when things really like kind of click and feel good. And I feel like in the zone is like, oh man, like this is a good session. I feel like I've needed the time and effort to get to this point to provide them with what they need. And then obviously you're getting good positive feedback and stuff back from them. So that's probably, I think that, what was that, 5? It's like my top 5, I think, off the top of my head. But I mean, there's people I'm leaving off for sure that, you know, have been awesome as well too.
You leave off, you get a message later and be like, yeah, what about me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What, I mean, you talk about the science shit or whatever, but what like drew me to your page specifically was you actually, I'm a teacher, that's my job. But you explain it better than me. So I get asked loads of questions because I only like coaching and PT and stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time I just steal your shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I just
steal
like,
it, man.
This guy's going to do it. Just the way that you're able to just simplify it. Your drawing's got a lot better as well recently.
Thank you. I've been working a lot on that. Yeah.
So that's good. But yeah, just the way that you know, the work that you do, and just even having that simple whiteboard that I obviously use at work as well, and kind of miming it out and stuff. It's just like, it's fucking idiot proof. It's just like so brilliant. You're able to like bring obviously you've got all the backup and that sort of stuff, but people don't actually really need to absorb all of that.
Yeah.
And just the way that you present it, I was just like, this guy, fuck, he's got it. So yeah, I'm sorry, I do steal loads of your shit and just send it.
No, steal it, man. No, thank you. I appreciate that as well too, because that's like I mean, I say it all the time. I said it a couple of times on this, but I mean, I'm really grateful for what I do, because I found all, you know, you get all these weird things, like I said, no joke, like, you know, now this day and age, it's the good and bad about social media. Like kids are like, even kids, 22, 23-year-olds are like looking at social media. They feel like if they're not like on a private jet right now, like they fucking failed at life or something. And I was like, I had no idea what the hell I was doing growing up. You know, same thing. Like I said, I had no idea when I was like out of college and shit. And it's funny how like things just came together. Cause like little shit, like I always like I said, I would go and write my shit on the fucking classroom board before the school. I always liked actually like public speaking. And I always liked like half of it is, I guess, probably being self-centered, like an attention. Like I liked whenever like you have to read something in front of a class. I'm like, all right, fuck, I'm going to try and make people laugh. Like when I read this, I'm going to make this, I'm not going to just sit here and read a fucking biography about whatever. I literally I had a class at one point in time, a public speaking class, and we had one open topic, and I spoke about Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, I mean, if that's not an example of just being a fucking meathead in college, I don't know what it is. So it was funny, man. I actually always liked public speaking. I always liked writing, and I just didn't really have anything to apply it to. And so it's funny is when I started training, I was so put off on social media because I had just the same thing. My initial perception of training was my initial perception of social media. It's like, oh, well, this is bad. You know, it's like, look, it's just people showing like, you know, abs and their ass and stuff, which is fine. But I'm like, I don't really feel like showing my abs and ass, you know, necessarily, maybe a little bit down the road once I warm up a little bit. And, but it's one of those things where it's so funny where it's like, people ask me stuff now. I was like, I don't find social media a chore. Like I like it. Like, it's just like, I realize like, oh, I like writing. I like speaking. I put a lot of time and effort into communicating. And because that's the same thing that was part of my job before, developing trainers. So it's like, if I'm giving a presentation and just, you know, because same thing, like I've learned from so many people and I gravitate towards people where it's like, I tell people all the time, I'm not that smart. I was like, there's no prerequisite to like come and take classes. I've just taken a shit ton of classes and then I try and like make it applicable. And then you talk about that stuff enough and hopefully you get decent at communicating it. So I appreciate that compliment, because that is something I put a lot of time and effort into, is, you know, trying to not just have this mess of shit in my brain that has no value if I can't translate it to people into, you know, something actually good in the gym. Right.
Well, yeah, a lot of people do use the science and studies and stuff as just blanket terms to like argue with people and shit like that without actually trying to like explain it. Obviously, that's a fucking rabbit hole that we're probably trying to avoid. But what was it? What I wanted to ask was, obviously you've got your favorite trainers.
Yeah.
And obviously not naming any names, but any big red flags, like you meet someone and you're like, this is fucked. Like
it's fucked.
Like you're not going to be able, like their mentality is so like, whether you get any red flags that would make you think this is not going to happen.
Oh, so like with someone that I'm training, like a potential client or something. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, the nice part is, where I'm at now is I don't get a whole lot of that, right? Because the funny thing is like where I get that is like people that are like 20-year-olds online, like, oh, fuck you, Ronnie Coleman. And I was like, the funny thing is I'll tell people like all the time, like, but Ronnie. And I was like, the funniest thing, this again, I can't help but think in posts. I need to do a post about this. Like when people say like, but Ronnie, I'm like, I'm not offended because I think that I'm more intelligent than you about this nerd stuff and you don't get it. I'm offended that you think you know more about Ronnie Coleman than I do. Like I fucking get it. I have nothing to say about but Ronnie, but I guarantee I've watched The Unbelievable more times than you have. And every fucking video he's ever put out, I fucking binged on. It's like, I just understand what's occurring that Ronnie's doing, and you don't understand it. You don't have any context for it. And no, so I mean, I get people there's, I don't know, I had somebody give me a saying at some point in time. You come into something, some presenter on some continuing education, he's like, if you're sitting here and you're thinking you're not going to learn anything, then you're right. So people's perceptions coming in. So, there's some people, I think, again, luckily, where I'm at, people that I'm around want to get better. And I'm honestly, I'm pretty laid back, man, where it's as far as like, I don't, even with clients, with the rare situation, like back when I had normal clients that have somebody sit in front of me and they feel they closed off, they think I'm a trainer, I'm a douche. I'm just going to say, eat chicken and rice and, belittle them and call them fat and stuff. And I think people don't understand. It's like, I understand how stupid bodybuilding is, right? Like on paper, bodybuilding is the dumbest thing on the entire fucking planet. Like when people think like, other bodybuilders get offended, like, oh, why are you making fun of us for our Speedos, blah, blah. I'm like, why wouldn't they make fun of us for being on stage in fucking Speedos, talking about a bunch of guys' glutes and shit? I'm like, it's the weirdest shit ever. And I think because I recognize it, I'm not so caught up into it. I think everybody cares about bodybuilding. Like nobody gives a shit about bodybuilding. 99% of people don't know anything about it. And so I think that helps me relate, even with normal clients, like just having these conversations where it's like, I don't care. I know it sounds weird. Someone's gonna say like, I don't care if they lose weight. I don't care if they get healthier. I care if like I meet the expectations that I set forth. And so I've had conversations with people where it's like, I don't want to talk about diet. And I was like, that's fine. I was like, just so you know, as a trainer, I can guarantee you will lose 0 pounds. Like, that's my guarantee. You might lose weight, but as far as how much weight are you going to lose, I can guarantee 0. If we're not going to keep track of anything, we have no idea what you're doing. And the same thing is like, I'm not going to tell you to stop drinking. I'm not going to tell you have to work out this many times or whatever it is. So even when I had like normal people, I'd get some red flags, as far as people that they're unwilling to address whatever issues they've got going on, if something really is or really isn't important to them. And so sometimes you really do have some like aha moments with people where it's like, oh, I get it. Like, even normal working out, like why would some normal person want to come work out? Like one, there's probably something more fun you'd rather be doing. You think everyone around you is judging you and is douchebags, which for the most part isn't true, but there's probably a couple douchebags judging people in gyms. And the rest of it's painful. Like who the fuck wants to do painful shit? Like they don't enjoy like the pain and the burn, and leg day is not the coolest day for them and shit. Like it just all sucks. And so the fact I think that I can understand that, but it's like, well, how important to you is not like having a heart attack when you're 55? Like how important is you to like actually enjoy your retirement? How important is it, whatever? And I think all those conversations, even like they translate into bodybuilding, because you know how bodybuilding is. There's some people that just want to do stupid shit or crazy shit, or they have these exact end goals in mind and their entire life is built around it. And I'm like, man, it's like, let's just talk through this for a minute. Like, let's figure out what's really important to you, why you really want to do that, or why you think you really want to do that. And so like the nice part is like, even if I have somebody that I get red flags from in some capacity along the journey, like lots of times we can just come to a pretty good place, I think, for the most part, where it's like, even if I had somebody that just wants to keep drinking beer and I was like, well, let's just get in the gym and you'll be moving more, but get your heart rate up 2 times a week. Like that's better than sitting on your couch or whatever. And then it's funny. You'll have people where it's, I've said this in posts, I've said it before. It's a truth I learned from trainings. People don't believe things that other people tell them. They only believe things that they tell themselves. And so it's like by not being a douche and just trying to push shit on people, I think lots of times people can come around themselves and be like, oh, like, so at first here's this guy that does stupid cuffs and bands and look at him just being an idiot. But then it's like, if you actually kind of get your head wrapped around some stuff, you actually understand there's a reason for it, and it's not just to look cool. And especially if you experience what things can be if done properly, and it's like, oh, holy shit, like I feel a muscle and this is horribly painful, and oh, this is like these perceived things that are supposed to happen when I train, then people tend to come around. And like I said, even at a high level, a lot of people sometimes, where I just said, like, let's go through something, let's figure something out. And I've had sessions that it's not like all these amazing aha moments and we're best friends and we're hugging and going on picnics afterwards or something. But I'm like, man, if we had one positive thing come out of the session, cool, man, take it. And if the other 90% was shit, I don't care if you tell anybody, I'll say, well, it was good, I learned this one thing. The other 90% was shit, and he talked about angles and got his protractor out and it was a waste of time. Like I'm fine with that, to be honest, man. I don't need everybody to like my stuff. I don't need everybody, to be my best friend. And I also don't have it in my brain that everything I'm doing is perfect or right. So again, if I have something that doesn't work well with somebody, it could be on my end, it could be on their end, or it could just be lost in translation in the middle. And so that's a huge thing. You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier too, where it's like, I genuinely just try and put out stuff to help people. And it sounds, I don't think it's cynical. I don't hope so, but like, I just don't expect anything back. Right. Like is my genuine desire just to help people, then that doesn't have anything coming back to me specific. Right. Helping is something putting out. That's it. There's no other return end. Now I'm a person, so I'm certainly happy when somebody says, man, that was great. Or they tell somebody how awesome it was or whatever. Like, that's very nice. I like that. Again, I'm a human, but I really try and keep it in my head that like, I'm just trying to put positive, helpful stuff out. And if it helps, it helps. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. You know what I mean? I will make jokes like that when people complain about stupid shit. I just can't help myself to complain about this or that, or people on, YouTube is just the strangest bunch of human beings on earth that exist on YouTube. And they'll complain about like me repeating a word. And I'm always like, well, you get what you pay for, man. Or I'll be like, man, you should really request your money back, man. I would complain as well too. Stuff like that. So I can't help myself a little bit with it. But it's, because again, if like a normal person, if you come on and you think my stuff is shitty, for me, when I see that, I just don't watch that stuff anymore. And I just carry on with my life. But other people now, it's day and age, they feel the need to tell me about it and stuff. And I was like, man, I better rethink my whole career because of this YouTube comment. I'm glad this person took time out to give me feedback. But, so yeah.
So what we'll do, Dan, I don't know if you want to ask one or two more questions, but I'm conscious of the fact that I'm sure Joe doesn't want to be on here for the next 3 hours reading.
I could definitely do that. So yeah, it's probably best. If
you throw one in, I'm sure I see one on your lips then, and then we'll jump onto these ones.
Well, I was watching. You did a podcast. Well, I wasn't watching it with Jewett. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the enjoyment of training, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. If someone comes to you and they're like, I really fucking like this move, even if you kind of like disagree with it, you'd be like, we can keep it, because the chances are that if you really like something, then you're going to put maximum like effort into it. What do you reckon the balance is between like enjoyment and kind of I'm looking for the right word, like what you think would be best? Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, again, the conversations on that I think are necessary. It's like, that's where I come, like, if I have a job, my job is to manage expectations, so there's a whole scale on there where the people where I would probably reiterate my feelings a little bit more strongly would be someone where their end goal is the number one thing they're training for. Right. So if my end goal is I need to be Mr. Olympia, then the end goal at that point in time is going to be more important than I enjoy training. Right. And so there's a whole scale here where some of it is me just making educated guesses, but some of it would be pointing at obvious evidence where someone's like, I need to get bigger triceps and I have to do skull crushers. And I could point at a body of evidence where it's like they've been doing it for a decade and their triceps are still shit, or every time they progress to a certain point, their elbows get injured. I would just say like, well, look, man, I'm like, you can keep doing them. That's completely fine. But based on past evidence, this decade of work that we have, here's what the research has concluded. You research in your sample size of 1, it doesn't fucking work. And, but there's a whole scale on there. And I tell people that all the time, honestly, where it's like, okay, well, for tricky stuff, because I think a lot of people pretend they have all the answers and stuff. Like there's the nature of joints, the nature of muscle bellies, and some things that you can't change a whole lot. If we have a tricky body part like lats or something, like I don't care how awesome any trainer thinks they are, they've never taken someone from, hey, that guy's got the shittiest back in IFBB, to, hey, that guy's back looks like Ronnie Coleman. So with all those things, there are times when I'm saying, okay, well, based on what we've done and based on where we're at, I think this would be a better path. And then we just have a dialogue about, well, how important is the balance of this may be the better path with a better outcome, but you're not enjoying yourself the whole way along with it. And so there's a whole host of things basically in between, where again, there could be somebody where I just say, look, man, you know, you've had to bring this body part up for a decade. It hasn't happened doing this. Like, come on, man. I'm like, this isn't me trying to get you to do something. Let's just point at some obvious stuff. And then there's a whole host of stuff in between there where it's just like, well, let's talk through this. And so yeah, it's something that's kind of individual with almost everybody. And then, like I said, depending on who it is and depending on their goal, if their main goal is like, man, I just like to train and I love this movement. It's like telling somebody like, you know, everyone says in the gym, like how dumb it is, like, oh, bodybuilders should never max out. It's like, well, again, if your goal is to be Mr. Olympia, you probably shouldn't max out. But if you like to call yourself a bodybuilder and you find maxing out from time to time fun, then fucking max out. Like, who gives a shit? Like, it's not like again, your paycheck doesn't depend on it. You know, your sponsorship doesn't depend on it. And so again, there's just, it's always going to be an individual thing with that specific, like something specific like that. But again, that's the whole joke is too, it's like, I don't give a shit what anybody does. Right. Even at the end of the day, like I wouldn't, even if I had this whole conversation with somebody and I walk them down this path, if you've got broken elbows, here's the history, here's where it is. And they say, you know, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't have like something that's like hanging on to me, like, oh my gosh, this person's an idiot. And every time I see him, I think they're an idiot. And every time I see him do their exercise, I think they're an idiot. I'm like, no, like I said, my part, they've made their peace with it. I've made my peace with it. And I get it. Like, you just fucking do your thing. And that's the same thing. I get people ask me that, like, what do you do when you go into commercial gym? Is it just the worst? It's like, what are you talking about? The worst? I was like, no, I don't give a shit what anybody does. I don't know what they're in there for. We've had zero conversations. And I joke that all the time. I said, there are a lot of people I know for sure they go to gyms just to prevent murder. It's like, well, if I don't come and do something physically aggressive and just move some fucking shit around, I'm going to lose my shit. I'm going to lose my shit domestically at home. I'm going to lose my shit at my coworkers or whatever it is. So I joke when someone's in the gym doing the fucking craziest exercise you've ever seen in your life, I was like, that could be murder prevention. That could be their goal for that exercise. So I don't have any feelings towards that. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, those types of things are, it's just, again, even for me, if I feel really smart about my tools, my exercises, it's still just the tool. So it's like, you know, you do whatever the hell you want with it if it's your deal.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give it up to the viewers at home.
Yeah, the thing is, we made a massive effort to get lots of questions in, and if we spend the whole time talking about, we also put a competition on, so the best comment wins a T-shirt. And we probably are only going to ask a handful. So I'll start at the top. From the guys at Diamond Theory Clothing, they asked, what are the telltale signs for someone who needs to back off when they're prepping, or is the old school approach of "did you die" still the way?
So when someone needs to back off, so like from a training standpoint, when they're prepping, I mean, honestly, the big thing would be, I think you'd have to look at the whole picture of like, you know, again, of looking at feedback that they're getting, looking at their actual lifts in the gym first and foremost. If progress is occurring, you know, you'd have to look to a certain degree. My headphones falling out, you know. There's a lot to look at there. I mean, the biggest thing that I would say first and foremost is if lifts start regressing, and then from there, obviously, they start dropping tissue, and you really can't have that happen unless you really can't have a good observation on that occurring unless it's from someone from the outside. And because what'll happen with that too is obviously, you know, like sometimes people get closer into a show, you know, they add in the most androgenic shit to their stack. And then it's like, oh, my lifts aren't going down or my lifts are going up. And I was like, well, that's just an equation for burning out even fucking faster, because you've improved some contractile tissue's ability to contract harder, but you're not laying down more tissue. You're stressing your body out more while already in a deficit. So that's why, to a certain degree, you even have to look at that kind of stuff. And for me, it's like, that's one of those things too, where it's like, that's half the reason I don't like to get too much into, I don't do any competition prep looking at, you know, diet or supplements or drugs, is because if it's just like everybody does things just sensible the way they should, which is just like this measured progressive approach to everything, then for me, it's just like, I know exactly what the pattern is going to be when I prep. You know, it's like, obviously when food's still relatively high and things are relatively good, things are tapering up. And as soon as things start to pull down, I'm just aware that, okay, we're going to be in maintenance with what we're doing in the gym. At some point, things pull down further, and I see that lifts start to drop off a teeny bit as they should. Then we pull more things down, and then we just kind of back things in, slowly come to a show. So it just takes, I think, a logical, sensible approach too. When you realize, I mean, at some point in time, again, some people like to say, oh, fuck, I hit a PR 3 weeks out or 2 weeks out, because that sounds cool on the gram and it makes it seem like you're hardcore. It's like, well, I don't care who you are. You're not putting on tissue at that point in time. You know, so what's really the point? And again, it's a little bit different for everybody. I've had people that I work with that'll hit PRs 3-4 weeks out, which again is really cool. But at some point in time, you got to realize, like, man, we're just holding on to tissue, so if you're just holding on to tissue, realize that's what training is for. Let training just hold on to tissue as minimal as possible, and then just let the deficit of your diet, the cardio, the drugs, whatever you got, just do the work for getting more body fat off. Because again, at that point in time, that all that isn't there to help you keep putting on tissue. It's there to just hold on to what you've got. And so that's where it is. I think some of the guys that especially the most chemically aggressive is like, well, the whole fucking point of that is, so you're just holding on to tissue. It's not so you can keep smashing things deeper and deeper into the ground. Enjoy the fact that tissue is going to hang on. Enjoy the fact that it's going to stick around, again, as you're in a deep deficit, as you can push, you can push a deficit harder, you can push cardio harder and hold on to tissue. You don't need to push, your training harder at that point in time as well, too.
I think, though, when you get in from someone who is 3 weeks out, I do think that I need the murder prevention more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. That's such a weird balance too, where again, like if you look at the way that I like to do things, when I'll have someone 3 weeks out, like the loads they're using, relative percentages of their PRs are still extremely high, so it's not uncommon for me to have somebody literally using 100% or, 95% of the loads that were their PR loads during prep. But the things that I'll taper down a lot is the volume will be tapered way down. At some point I'll take the proximity of failure a little bit short of failure. But I think that's a mistake as well, too. Like, honestly, if people go into the gym without some sort of structured, measured plan, then you can just like, I'm just going to go pump shit until I'm not angry anymore. And, I think, honestly, the ability to still hit those high loads and still hit something measured and structured, again, the joke is I know murder prevention is obviously half of a joke, but it's still, honestly, I think people need that structure so they can still have that outlet. They still can obviously prevent murder outside of the gym, but they're just not going to run away with themselves all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm going to do just whatever stupid shit. Cause that's what a lot of people do. They get close to the show and it's the one time of the day they probably feel good for, like, okay, they got the right balance of their pre-workouts kicked in. They actually probably had some carbs time before, so their brain's actually working. So you literally get in the gym, like, this is the one time I feel good. And before you know it, you're in there just 2 or 3 hours. And then you wonder why you feel like dog shit the entire rest of the day. So no, I get it. The murder prevention is necessary. But I think you can get some of that still actually training hard, but just having some parameters that you're staying within, so you don't run away with yourself.
What I really struggle with is leaving reps in the tank once I'm actually. It's like I spent my whole life learning to ignore all of the cues to like stop.
Yeah.
And trying to like tone them down is something that I've really struggled with when I've experimented with a deload, which apparently everyone needs a deload even if they're wet. I don't think I had a deload for about 7 years or something, but it's
no, I had solid decades straight without a deload and seemed to do all right. So
okay, so next one is from TJ, who does powerlifting, and she's a wellness competitor.
I know TJ, word.
She says she's really happy with the muscles she's built in her upper body, just wants to maintain that and focus on building her lower. Any advice, recommendations on building a muscle maintenance program for the upper body, training frequency, exercise selection, intensity?
If you could just write her one live on the podcast.
Yeah, hang tight. Here we go. I got my board right back here.
I already use your app, and it's been awesome to get me where I want to be. But just want to maintain my upper. So she's obviously subscribed to you already. So
hell yeah. Honestly, that I always tell people, like, so the first thing I would do is just, build your split around how quickly you can recover from lower body. So if you've got, lower body is the goal, I think it would make sense to kind of split it up into segments, so maybe have, a posterior chain, do maybe glutes and hams dominant one day, do quad dominance another day. And obviously you could have some crossover. And I would just build a split first off around, okay, well, what can I actually recover from and what can I progress? And whether that looks like, maybe training lower body every other day, and just having like an A-B rotate. And then I would, from there, I would just say, well, what's the least amount of work I can do possible to maintain upper body? And probably what it would look like is just one total upper body session. And again, all that stuff is just guess. I mean, the thing that's not guessing is train your lower body as often as you can recover from it. And so that for sure, if that was the only thing she trained, obviously the lower body would grow. And then the whole thing with the upper body is you want as little as possible to maintain without eating into the recovery pie of what you've got going for your lower body. So it would probably look like some sort of lower body every other day, and then just plug an upper body in there with whatever that rotation looks like. So it could be, two lower body days to one upper body day, then you have your off days or whatever it is. Or it could even be something where you have like, 2 or 3 or 4 rotations through lower body with one upper body or whatever. So the semantics of how you keep that in there, you'd have to mess around with a little bit. But most people that have trained for more than 5 minutes, they'll be surprised how well they hold on to tissue. Just again, doing like if it was just again upper body once a week, touching on everything, it probably wouldn't lose any tissue at all. So that's probably somewhere around the structure I would go about it.
It's interesting because you talk about the recovery pie.
Yeah.
And this is something that I end up trying to cover quite a lot. When people are saying, I want to bring up a body part or whatever, their instant kind of thing is I must train it more.
Yeah.
But actually what you're saying and what I've heard as well from a few other people is you should probably train other things less.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you train more and there's no pie left, it's going to do fuck all anyway, right?
Yeah. And again, there's a whole host of how you would go about that balance. But I always tell people, I was like, you aren't actually prioritizing a body part if you don't actually have something you've picked to deprioritize at the same time. And that makes everybody butthurt. And I've been the exact same thing where it's like you talk to somebody, it's like, what do you want to do like for your program? Like, well, I want to bring up delts, and triceps, my hams and glutes suck, and quad sweep as well too, and just a little bit of like upper chest. And I'm like, so your entire body pretty much. And I'm like, no, so just follow an even balanced program. No. I don't want that. I want to bring up this and I'm like, I got it. You want to bring up your whole body or you want to have something specific, you're going to have to train something less. And the funny thing is, that exists across every single level. And I've helped some people with that get over some mental hurdles where it's like, especially at a higher level, I would make the argument, you'll get people that just, it's mentally tough. Like nobody wants to not train something. But I've told some people where it's like, you need to stop training this body part, or you need to stop training this entire group of body parts. If otherwise it's never going to catch up ever. Because that's how it normally works is people, they train the thing that they like to train. That's probably their best body part. And then you'll be amazed what you have to do to not get that body part to grow. And that's all a bodybuilding is, something relative to that. So again, if you want to bring your legs up and your upper body's awesome. I've had people where it's literally like, don't train your upper body. And they're like, well, for how long? And I was like, just keep sending me progress pics and I'll let you know when you can start again. People want to lose their mind. And that's the same thing. It's like, I get it. Because there's been times where I was like really honest with myself and said, if I really want to bring up and be more balanced, I got to stop training lower body. And, but then I'm like, well, my outcome's not that important to me. And I definitely would rather just train lower body than not training. So fuck that. And then I'm fine with that. Cause again, it's like, I'm not trying to be Mr. anything. And so I'm rather going to choose my training happiness over the outcome. But if again, the outcome's the goal, sometimes you have to do some drastic shit to actually produce a change. Cause think about the pro bodybuilding world. I could name dozens of pros where it's like, you hear the story, they turn pro and it's like, all right, if he just brings up this one body part, he's going to be nasty. And the entire career, he might get bigger, might have different levels of conditioning, but it's the same story the entire time. It's like, I just need to bring him up. I just need to bring him up. And they never do it. Most people are unwilling to do extreme things to have an extreme change to their physique. So.
Yeah.
Solid.
So the next was actually quite a sad question, to be fair, because it was put on there 2 weeks ago. How closely do you work with athletes' diets and supplementations as a coach? For example, do you converse with John Meadows when working with Terence as the changes John makes have any effect on the training? So the principle of the question obviously is to do with you have coaches on separate parts of what they're doing,
Yeah. Honestly, with the good and the bad is I try and always have the highest level of respect for athletes in their choice of who they coach with. So if someone's committed to a coach, I never give my feedback on what they're doing, even if I don't think it's great. But in the example of John and Terence, when you have somebody that does a good job, it's very, very simple conversations that have good, sensible approaches, that keep their athletes, if they need to be well fed, that don't do any drastic changes coming in. So basically, literally the conversations I have with Terence all the time, I'll be like, where's food at? Where's your recovery at? And then basically anytime there's a change, let me know what the changes are. And so it's not, for the most part with somebody, off season to in season or whatever, it's conversations just around recovery. Where's your food at? Where's your recovery? Where are your supplements at? And then obviously a lot of that, the beauty, especially if I'm working with somebody in person, is I get to be around them, so I get to have the conversations and just the observations of, well, how's your sleep? How's your life stress? How's all that kind of stuff that's tougher to pick up on? And then I actually get to see performance firsthand. So it's honestly very, very easy. I've honestly never had too many issues with any athlete or any coach. It's more so just conversations about where they're at, where their diet's at, and then again, outside stuff. And again, for me, it's really easy because again, if things are being done sensibly week to week, there's never any drastic changes at all week to week. And so I mean, honestly, John did everything awesome with Terrence, and that was our continual conversations was how good I felt about him being with John, and same from his end. And as anytime John and I had conversations, it was really nice. It was, him obviously a massive compliment when he'd say you did a great job on this or that body part or this came up. And I'd always just be like, man, I'm just happy, Terrence is good. You're doing a good job with him. And, I tell people that all the time. He'd be perfectly happy with me using the example of like when people look at, last year is really a breakout year for Terrence, obviously, and not from our end, nothing crazy because I saw the progress. I knew eventually where it was going to go. But looking at obviously his level of size and conditioning, and people are always like, man, what'd you do? And everyone wants the peak week. And John had Terrence eat the exact same foods the entire way. His diet did not change. Every single day was exactly the same right up to the show. And he didn't use any diuretics at any point in time. It was like literally the morning of the show. I think for the Olympia, he actually had to cut water a little bit just to make weight, to actually get into the weight cap when he had to go weigh in. But aside from that, like the Arnold, 0 diuretics. And if you look at pictures of how he looked, he just literally woke up, did the same thing. I think he drank a little bit of water in the morning with his meal. That was it. And just went and got on stage and did his shit. I've never had issues, luckily, with any coach really. And obviously just no issues with obviously John and Terrence always did a really, really good job with him. So.
Good. Obviously we're not going to rush over the John thing because it's been done. And there's nothing we could say that could do that justice. So we'll brush over it. That's not to say that we don't all have thoughts on the situation. So anyway, Coach Dan, PT, my question to Joe, what are your thoughts on utilizing high volume reps, sets of body weight movements for hypertrophy?
So again, it just all takes context. I mean, at the end of the day, things have to be progressive. And so obviously certain body weight things done progressively can work really, really well. So again, depending on the individual, depending on how much they weigh, I use the example when everybody, and still is unfortunately going through various states of lockdown and stuff throughout the world. I'm like, man, for upper body, everybody get some rings, man, because you can attach rings to anything, gymnastics rings. And, if you're a big guy, and you can go from doing 10 pull-ups to 20 pull-ups, whatever targeting you're trying to target, you can grow. So obviously that's a great exercise. I say same with dips, obviously that's if you can do however many dips or ring dips or whatever it is, rings just because you can attach them anywhere. There's a component of obviously you can progress for a long period of time there up into a certain point, and then it just turns into going for a jog basically, So there's an upper end limit to where it's things. And again, I don't know what the exact number is. It's one of those things I don't think is worth arguing. Like people like to argue about it, but there's very rare times that I honestly go outside of maybe 30 reps as far as actual working sets. And honestly, I do that for like legs. I do it sometimes for delts and not most other body parts. So even if in theory, it says that you can hypertrophy progressing things upwards of 30 plus reps or whatever, in practice, I don't really know of anyone actually doing that outside of that rep range much.
Yeah.
So for a period of time, challenging movements can work great. But then it's just all within the context of up to what point. And if somebody's just training at home and they're curious about it, then it's like, well, then just get a belt, then just dip with weight around you, whatever. So there's this notion of you just like doing body weight things because it's more functional or whatever. There is something obviously cool of that. I mean, just being able to do just some shit and stay in shape and do stuff around your garage or your house. But again, it's at some point in time, there has to be measurable progress. And volume runs out at some point. You just can't keep pushing volume up, whether it's within one set or multiple sets or whatever it is. Load has to go at some point in time.
So that kind of leads on to the next one, which I think you kind of just answered. Liam Payne Ritchie, you wrote, how important a novel or new stimulus is for growth? Are they overhyped by the culture of touching new weights every week with a pure progressive overload approach? But I think you kind of just...
So that's one of those things where I think, it's a stupid opinion. So it's like, fuck, novels, like go and jump some rope, like that's novel. If I do some burpees, that's novel. So no, change for the sake of change doesn't do anything in my opinion. People will do something different where it's like, anything new will produce some sort of feedback, right? So you might get sore, like, oh my gosh, I hadn't done these before and I'm sore as shit. And I was like, there's literally no end. Like, go fucking change all the light bulbs in your house and tell me you don't have like weird sore shoulders or something. Next thing, go do some gardening work. It's like the perceived, like there, there's that thing. It's someone made of the saying is like the best workout is the one you're not doing or whatever. And I was like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And so, some novel feedback of just weird, new, different pain people perceive sometimes as being a good thing. But the reality is, it's like you need, your workout does need to be different every single time, but normally it just needs to be, 1% different, progression of the variables and stuff that you're already doing. And as far as, I know people probably are asking the novel stimulus and touching new weights. Obviously we've heard JP saying that the most. I feel like that comes down to, individual coaching, where it's like, I totally get the concept of how that can help people progress and break through barriers, but it's just not something that I would say everybody has to do. Because if you tell somebody, it's like, oh, I have to, do a, 2 rep max on something just to get the feel of like 8 plates on a bar. It's like, well, no, I don't think you have to do that. But just because I don't think you don't have to do that doesn't mean I don't think it can be a valuable tool. Now, so that's the thing too, is like whatever a coach works well and then works well for their athletes is a valuable tool. And obviously there's a component of progression there, right? If it's like, do you have to have progression in that specific manner? No, but if someone can produce results with it and the concept makes sense, then that can have a place as well too. But I wouldn't put it in the category if it's a necessity or something,
But it's about like for the example for like JP, it's a methodology. You have to take it in its entirety, really. If he's just to pluck those, I have to do a 2 rep to feel it just out of the thing and just smash it into your own without actually thinking about the conceptual reason that it exists.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like probably like what's wrong with people absorbing a lot of this information. They're just plucking shit out, just stuffing it in.
Yeah.
Thinking that's how it works.
Yeah. It literally would be someone that's like, all they've ever done is like squeeze pink dumbbells. And they're just like, oh man, I'm not getting results. And so they're going like, you know what? I'm going to follow this JP guy, watch like 3 posts and be like, all right, that's it. They've never done RDLs with more than 225 in their life. They go to the gym the next day and they put like 6 plates on, they break something and they're like, hey, fucking JP's a fucking idiot. And I'm like, well, hold on now. Let's get some context here. Yeah. Well, that's the same thing. Like, man, I love everything that JP does, where it's like, if you get more than anything else, like look at the, like you said, look at look at that whole concept of what that plugs into and the component of, progression. And it's all progression. It's everything revolves around progression. Everything revolves around, those are winning, a victory of basically, whether that's a physical victory or a mental victory as well too. And that's a huge thing for a coach and a people that coaches a group of people or has a group of people involved. Like cultivating that stuff is massive, right? Where it's, again, we're doing things that are progressive. We're doing things that are wins. And people, that's a thing where, again, like you said, people like cherry pick random things out of people's stuff and try and whatever. And it's like, no, like you got to look, especially if you want to. Not everybody gives a shit. You can just watch the post just for casual entertainment. You don't have to know the ins and outs of everybody. But if you're going to say something about somebody, you better know the ins and outs about somebody. But yeah, like that's the whole, everything that's created within, like that's one of my favorite things about JP is the culture he's created behind his entire himself, his training, his coaching, his athletes, his business. It's everything. It's 99.9% beneficial for people reading it. And then you'll have the way the internet works is that 0.1% that's debatable. You'll have people argue online about who's right or who's wrong and saying a bunch of stupid shit. And I was like, well, you're just proving you don't know shit about producing results. Because again, the people producing, like I could train with somebody that has the complete perceivably opposite methodology of me. And if they were actually about producing results, we could both go have a great workout together and everybody would be fine, but that's the nature of humans, right? It's just, they'd rather just fight about shit.
I think the problem that I have, because I know when JP's put on something about what he does, because I'll get about 30 texts being like, should I do this? Like, when you watch David Attenborough narrate about gazelles, do you think maybe like you should do what the gazelle, you're not JP?
Yeah.
So like when JP's sharing what he's doing, you can look at him and then you look in the mirror and go, hang on.
Yeah.
It's not, so it's, and the problem that you, with social media as well, some of it is just people being able to filter it and actually make it like contextualize it for themselves.
Yeah.
Rather than just going, JP does it, I definitely need to do it, forgetting that JP's put 20 years in the bag and it's like just dripping with tissue.
Yeah.
And then again, just like cherry picking that out. But I can always tell when he's put something up because I get about 30 messages.
Yeah.
Should I do this? It's like, well, we can do that.
Yeah. What we can do is we can have a conversation, but I guess the problem, like I feel like anybody that will come onto my stuff casually it's like, why the fuck is this video so long? Why is this post so long? And I'm like, I mean, honestly, I've never once thought about, I'm going to be honest, when I have this notion of trying to keep things concise. But if you don't understand the concept of why I'm trying to explain something, I really, really try and create context, right? I mean, then I just can't help, shit goes into fucking long ass answers. I can't help it. Because again, if somebody just sends a post about JP and just says this, it's like, all right, well, buddy, like, go grab a drink and let's sit down and let's have a chat. Like, we can talk about it, but it's not going to be a yes or no answer, right? I mean, this is what I do now most of the time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you your answer in one word, and then I'm going to ramble on for 10 minutes and try and create some context for that. But
that's exactly why I liked your post, because a lot of people don't even bother trying. But you do, and I find myself on your Instagram a lot listening to the end, if not for anything else, for looking at a better way of explaining it, because it's just you just house it in. It's like the way I could see the conversation that I would be having, people trying to wriggle out of these little things. You're like,
yeah.
I've thought of this answer before, and I suppose that's something that comes with, like, you've got that much experience. You already know the questions that are coming before they come. But people that don't watch the whole video, I've noticed, watch halfway and then write shit that you've actually covered later.
That's my favorite, actually. Yeah. Those are my favorite comments.
If you did watch to the end, you'll see that actually. That's
a special type of human. I mean, those are people that I really want to study, because I don't relate to that species of human, and I want to know what's going on with their brain, honestly. Because I'll have people like, I've recently done this series. I thought it was a funny joke. It just randomly came out of my brain at one point in time when I start a video, because any of my YouTube stuff, I never do multiple takes. I just go and start talking, and whatever comes out, comes out. I'll even be in the middle of videos like, well, if I was a normal person for YouTube, I'd probably start over right now, but fuck it, let's keep trudging through. And I started with a joke at some point in time in one of my videos, where I don't remember which one I did at first, was like, if you guys want to have arms exactly like Phil Heath, then, stick around. And I'll literally have like my little fucking hypertrophy coach graphic intro or whatever. And then I come back and it says something like, I'll tell people to like and subscribe. I'll like and subscribe first. Then I'll tell you how to get arms exactly like Phil Heath. And then as soon as I come back, the joke will be like, all right, first you need like a time machine, go back in time, have your parents like populate with like his parents and pass on the exact strains needed, and then follow every action that he did for the past 2 decades. And then you'll have arms like Phil Heath. And I'll be like, then the joke will be like, if you're watching this, you probably have shitty arms. So I'll probably make your arms maybe slightly less shitty. And if you stick with it for a decade, maybe you'll just have okay looking arms. That's really the goal of this video. And the funny thing is, I'll get people that will comment, like, all they'll do is be like, fuck you, you can't get arms like Phil Heath. You just need to have his genetics. You need to blah, blah. And I'm like, you literally didn't make it out of the first like 17 seconds of the video, but you took fucking time out to comment. At least let the video keep going while you're writing your little mean comment. And then maybe halfway through, you're like, oh, whoa, shit. Oh, it's a joke. Okay, cool. And, but that's literally, I was like, who the fuck would comment on a video in the first like 9 seconds? I was like, I need to study your brain. Like, I
just ready.
Gruesome. Like, once you die, we need to dissect it and just see what the fuck's going on in there out of sheer curiosity. There's some connections happening that are not happening, previous decades or of, previous generations of human existence, but that's a different conversation.
So, another question from Adam Ledner, who is renowned for sending in inappropriate questions.
Sweet.
But he's actually put a sensible one in for a change.
Oh, wow. All right.
I sent him a private message about that.
Did you? You told him to lay off.
Leave your usual bullshit out.
Feel privileged. All right.
What is something that you believe or preach which goes against the grain of other coaches? I'm sure there's plenty of these, but what is the main one that you could think of?
I mean, I think that the biggest difference, I would say, and I wouldn't say this is the only thing that I'll say that could potentially sound, I don't want to say conceited or whatever, but like I've put more time and effort into understanding like exercises are something that someone created. Like, people don't realize like somebody created this exercise as a tool for a goal. And everyone in the industry, for the vast majority of it, is still very, very tool focused. So they focus on like these, even if they get the idea at some point in time, like everybody, the funny thing now it's actually, if you look amongst all IFBB pros and coaches, it's not uncommon for someone to say like, you really shouldn't do barbell curls because they're not good for your elbows. And so I feel like we're kind of away from the stigma that you have to do barbell curls. But the point isn't that barbell curls are bad or that dumbbells and cables are inherently better. The point is understanding the concept of like, okay, well, how was this tool created? Who was it created for? How does this actually fit your body? And because people will just then say barbell curls are bad. People now will say squats are bad, deadlifts are bad, everything's bad, like all this stuff. And I was like, no, that's not the point of any of this. The point is to take some time out and have a little bit of a deeper understanding of the pieces that go into this tool, so you can have a complete understanding of not just labeling things this way or that way. And so I'd say that's if there's something different. I think it's, again, it goes, people get, occasionally like they'll see something different. Oh, there's a cable here or a band here or whatever here, and they get emotional about it. I was like, that's the difference. Like, you're emotional about this shit. Like, it's pieces for me, just little pieces of building something bigger. And it's the same for me. It's the same as anything. Like, I wouldn't go and like, see like a fucking something complex, like a fucking car or anything machinery that I don't know shit about, and just make blanket statements about the overall thing. And when someone else could explain like, well, no, here's why this piece is here and this piece is here, and here's why this car is the same as this car from an engine standpoint, but has a different whatever, where it's, again, some people just don't understand the pieces, and they just make comments and assumptions and prescription based on like the totality of an exercise. And so that's probably still the biggest thing. And honestly, to be fair, I mean, some of it is really tough. Like, some of it I can explain in a couple seconds. And then some of it, we talk things about things lining up or things, whatever, like that shit does get kind of tricky. And so that's why, again, some of my videos, I can't help but make fucking 20 minutes if I'm really trying to explain something, is because that's the other balance too. I don't ever say any of that to be like, oh, like I understand things and you guys are fucking peasants and dumb. No, I try and open the door for fucking people so they can kind of just, have that and get their heads around that a little bit more. So that's still something that I think is a little bit of a struggle. Struggle is not the right word, but that exists, that people still get a little bit. And I'll see it, man. I'll even see it with some coaches where it's like, they'll make a change here or adjust to this. And then, I don't know if they get some fucking negative comment from somebody hardcore. And then the next week it's like, oh, fucking bands are the dumbest fucking shit ever. And I'll be like, you were using bands for like a couple weeks straight, and now it's dumb again. Like, why is it dumb again? And then people have arbitrary things. It's like, oh, well, bands are good, but you shouldn't use 2, because if you use 2, you're a fucking pussy. And I'm like, why would 2 be like, shouldn't it be a percentage here maybe about based on something? Like, why would someone that's using 2 plates on a hack have to use the same amount of bands as somebody that's doing 12 plates on the hack? Like, there's something that goes into that. So, that's one of those, and I get it. Like I said, it's tough. I've been there where it's like, I've been so emotional about shit, people trying to educate me. Like, for me at first, I literally remember being angry about people that would say anything against like Arnold. Like, how could training less be beneficial? Like, how could bench press not be the best exercise for chest or whatever? And so I understand where all that comes from, because it's really, really tough to break out of like these traditions and these like things that we've got like entrenched in the bodybuilding world. And but I think that's something we're coming far. And honestly, I feel like now, thankfully, because most things should actually translate to better results, and people that are at the highest level generally don't have huge egos with their training. And if they really want to be better, they're pretty open-minded. So I think now, honestly, looking around compared to 10 years ago, it's a lot more common for people to just be like, well, this works for me, or I'd rather do this, or this didn't hurt my knees, or like, what, people kind of realize like, oh, I don't have to do any exercise. And that's lucky, because we've had like a high level athletes that for generations have kind of perpetuated. I always say that's why Dorian Yates is one of my favorite bodybuilders, is because if you look at all the shit he did when he did it, like that was against the grain big time. A lot of things, people are like, oh, he's hardcore and free weights, but people use Dorian. I was like, Dorian's programming was made up of like, 2/3 machines. And I was like, why would you say you use Dorian as the example? Like, gotta do hardcore bodybuilding, barbell stuff. And I was like, his program is literally 2/3 machines. And I think it worked out all right for him, So that stuff, again, people like Dorian create a lot of benefit for the industry. If people realize what he did, and again, don't focus again on the specifics of like, I have to do this because Dorian did it. I was like, no, like Dorian taught us we don't have to do shit that people before us did it. But again, I honestly think that's an area where making the industry as a whole is making a lot of progress. There's not as much, dogmatic stuff forced on people as far as things you have to do. It's just, I don't think it's quite like that as much anymore.
That leads me on to something else. The controversy behind bands.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to, I mean, obviously you're trying to like potentially match a strength curve and stuff, like, the greater the angle in the leg, for example, the weaker you get. That's why they don't make buildings with supporting beams that are right angles. But maybe you could explain the correct way to set up a band, because I'm seeing a lot of people setting them up so the tension is instant, and I feel like they're just using it to lift more weight.
Yeah. And so some of that's like, it's a tough thing. It's like people saying, and I get it, because this is the one thing I always, people are like, oh, bands are stupid because somebody put 37 bands on. And I was like, that's like saying squats are stupid because everybody squats wrong. I mean, because honestly, it'd be like throwing squats out. Like 80% of people, 90% of people that squat wrong. So it'd be like, oh, look at these dumb squatting. Squats are such a stupid exercise. So the same thing happens with bands, obviously, where there's a large percentage of people that are like, oh, fuck. And now this way I can have 8 plates on the bar instead of 6. And who the hell doesn't want that? So I mean, honestly, it's a mildly complicated thing, but the whole point of bands, again, if we're looking at something that covers a relatively large range of motion, pressing motions tend to make the most sense, like a squat pattern. The whole goal is to create a large load discrepancy from the top comparatively to the bottom. And so I honestly think the best way to do it is, so it depends on the way that you do it, but let's say we'll do both ways. If you banded from the bottom, you would want the bands doing nothing at the first couple inches of the range of motion, and then coming on and creating a large difference. And the inverse, if you banded them from the top. So it's like when you're at the top of the motion, the top couple inches, the band should be doing nothing. And then they should come on after you've made it through those first couple inches, and then create a large percentage difference when you're at the bottom. And all that comes down to is torque. Muscles manage torque. And that's why everybody knows if it was literally just about moving weight in a distance, the top 6 inches of a squat would be the same difficulty as the bottom 6 inches, which everybody knows. It's like, oh, it's all the same. It's like, okay, well, what's your top 6 inches PR versus your bottom of a squat 6 inches PR? It's probably slightly different. And so I think when some people like, it's, hopefully that's just kind of common sense. Like, oh, that makes sense. And it's like in the bodybuilding world is like the whole reason you're moving, any point you're moving, is to create a stimulus that will have you grow muscle. And so it's like, well, what's the point of moving through some space if it's not creating that stimulus? And again, you can still get the job done, which is the things that I'm not saying that you can't, but the whole point of those bands and all that is it should be more efficient. So that it should be a percentage. Like that's the example. Again, if you're doing 2 plates, you should probably have a relatively small band on a hack. If you're doing 4 plates, maybe a big band. If you're doing 8 plates, you probably need 2 bigger bands to really create that level of difference. So it should, and maybe it's this is the only thing that would make shit more complicated because it's not quite this simple because of limb lengths, ratios, how people have trained. I could calculate some percentages that you could carry across for somebody, but it wouldn't be something uniform. But if that's how it would be, a little bit less emotional anyway. And then even with that is band ratings aren't easy to do depending on how you have set up on the machine. So if I want to know what difference I'm making, in my gym, I have a game scale just out of curiosity. So like, how much is this offloading at the bottom or how much is this adding at the top or whatever it is? And I'll measure it out. And then like out of working backwards, I'll be like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's how much weight discrepancy I need from top to bottom on this exercise. But I always tell people, if you really know how to train, it comes down to rep speed and it comes down to your final rep speed. And that's how I make adjustments on it with people that I train is based on how their final reps look for somebody that actually knows how to train. I'll make adjustments on load differences based totally on rep speed. And I think that should be really the gold standard. But the problem with that is most people don't know how to train. And they don't know how to train close to failure. And so that's not always a good tool for like the normal person out there to know, well, okay, well, how do I know based off of this, where to go? And I'm like, well, you actually shifted which muscles you're using for the last 4 reps and bounced anyway. So I can't measure shit. So that's one of those things. It is, I understand why people mess it up, unfortunately. But shit, it is what it is.
Do you think there's a point where, cause like banding, I don't know, I'm relatively old. We didn't band because I don't think they even existed, or they hadn't been on my radar. But then we didn't have Instagram or anything like this.
Yeah.
Do you reckon? I mean, obviously, I followed that path, so I'm like kind of biased to like, oh, you should start like by just doing basic shit, and then maybe advance into looking at kind of strength curves and stuff like as an advanced tool. Like if you're doing like a hack squat with like a 10 each side, like you should probably just work on that way. I don't know. That's my kind of
So so the short answer is from a practical standpoint, I would lean more towards like, you learn how to do the movement, right? So there's things where it's like, in my brain, it's like, okay, learn how to do the movement properly. And then we can worry about bands and shit. The funny part though, that if I'm really, trying to just say, all right, well, let's keep these principles uniform. Like if we look at like a single joint, something, it's like, it'd be like akin to saying like, okay, I've got 2 different leg curls in my gym and one of them's badass and it's knotless and it has a good profile. And one of them's a fucking piece of garbage and it's actually the opposite of the way it should be. It's almost like saying, well, you should learn how to do stuff on this piece of shit before you're ready to have a better strength one over and use this good one over here. So I honestly go both ways on it. Like, again, from a practical standpoint, I honestly would kind of just address this on an individual standpoint because I honestly don't think it's wrong if you had somebody come in the first time, because again, the whole thing that people mix up, and won't go down this rabbit hole, but people that have blurred the lines between this notion of there's things people should be able to do primally, like this is a primal functional movement. You should be able to do this to exist as a human being. And then also what are exercises? So again, for me to someone say, well, you shouldn't put a band on a hack because you should learn how to do the movement properly, whatever. I was like, a hack, there's nothing fucking primal or functional about a fucking hack. It's a piece of machinery. Because again, I always say people like you get butthurt about me putting a band on here that took me fucking 2 minutes to do. I didn't have to go to fucking school for it. Guess what? I didn't need any engineers to design it. I didn't need a fucking factory to weld it, but you're fine using this hack. Just realize a lot more engineering, design, and manufacturing went into this fucking hacking machine than went into me putting a band around it. So again, I really think it comes down to an individual approach. But it is an interesting topic because again, there's lines that are just blurred where again, that's one of the things people talk about all the time in the industry where they have no fucking idea what they're talking about because they'll constantly contradict themselves. If they really feel like you have to do this, you have to do this pattern, you should do it this way, but then they'll do a whole bunch of other shit that doesn't align with that. So that's an interesting topic, but maybe that's a rant for another day.
Do you think when people are starting out, because like, how quickly can you identify that something isn't for someone? Like, it's probably not. I mean, you could probably see some stuff like instantly. You've got enough experience where you could see someone like mechanically or structurally that something is unlikely to work for them.
Yeah.
But how long do you have them? Like, I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe it's instant. I don't know. Try like the basics and you know, the primal moves, as you were saying, before you go, okay, I can clearly see that's not going to build any tissue. It's not working in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's got to be a balance on there because the way that most people start training, you know, because the reality is any exercise that you do in some capacity is a sport that you're participating in. It's not something that's really perfectly aligned to what the human body is supposed to do, again, from this, you know, fucking developmental standpoint or whatever, how we've evolved to do these things. So everything's a bit of a sport. And I think sports are good, right? So you playing any sport is just good for coordination, whatever it is. So again, depending how most people get into it, like when my kids, they want to work out now and stuff in the gym, they're 7, they're 5, they're 3. Like I'll have them do some stuff where it's like, all right, hold on to something. We're going to squat, you know, let's pick up a bar and deadlift and let's do whatever, because it's good for them to just learn how to coordinate and control their body. At what point in time would I really be concerned about, well, should we be doing the most efficient thing or blah, 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 or whatever? You know, I don't know. You know, there's some things like right away that I know, like, you know, a squat's a perfect example. And like, again, people get butthurt, like, oh, everyone's got a barbell squat. Everyone's got a barbell back squat. Like it's the fucking primal king of whatever. I was like, it's not primal. Like no one has ever had in real life a perfectly balanced manufactured piece of steel that's balanced, land right on their upper back, and all of a sudden have to lift it for X amount of reps or whatever it is. It's like, it's never happened. It's not primal. And so and people get so fucking butthurt about that. So for example, like if I got my son, is his proportions, my oldest son is like my wife. My middle son is like Tom Platz. He's like built for squatting. He's got these short little femurs. He's fucking thick rib cage. I can just tell if he wants to, he's going to be beastly. But my older son is lanky. He's got like long as my mom, his mom has long ass legs, and he's got these long ass legs. So, you know, unless he's got the craziest ankle mobility in the universe, I already see it. Like everyone talks about like squats are this primal thing that everybody can just do right. Everyone's seen that fucking meme of a little like 1-year-old squatting and like, look how you should squat. Like my son has never squatted like that. His femurs have been so long his whole life that if he actually squatted properly, it's always going to look like a good morning. And if he ever squats all the way to depth, his spine's going to completely round or whatever. And again, if he wants to squat to depth because he's bending over and picking shit up because he's 7 years old and his spine rounds, that's fine because your body's supposed to do that. Would I ever make him really do barbell back squats and progress the loads on him? If I train him at some point in time, probably not. I probably just say, oh, well, let's do something with a more upright torso that's going to fit you better. And that's perfectly fine. So an example from a training standpoint, like that would be me identifying something as like, you're probably never going to do barbell back squats if he wants to work out, if he wants to do something to be a better athlete or to look good or whatever it is, because no one has to do that to have bigger muscles or to be a better athlete or anything. Now, again, if he wants to power lift and he wants to compete and do barbell back squats, then okay, you're going to do barbell back squats because that's the sport you've chosen. Or if he just thinks it's fun because his buddies think it's fun, that's fine. But that's going to be like, well, that's the same reason like we watch like Lane Norton squat and everybody likes to make fun of his squat and says it's like a squat morning. And I'm like, well, he's got the longest femurs in the world. He's been squatting like that probably since he was 8. And he likes to squat. So he's going to keep squatting that way. And people are going to tell me he's squatting wrong. And those people are telling me squatting wrong probably have these little fucking baby femurs. It's shut up. You were just born with shorter femurs, so yours look pretty, and his looks the best it's going to look for how he wants to squat. It's a good squat for his structure. So again, there's a whole host of shit where it's like, it just depends on the context, I guess, of the human. But I don't think there's anything that people really have to do.
Well, that's it's a good squat for his structure is a great thing to take away from that excerpt, because you have so many people, and we actually have like an Insta thing here called the Form Police, which basically like destroy everyone about anything, because I don't know, but like a lot of it's like I can see like that is their limit for like what they're doing, or like you have to do like a leg press and your knees have to. I'm 6'2". That's not going to happen. I'm not. My pelvis is going to fly off. So I think that's a good thing to like mention. Within your capabilities and stuff. I gave up on squats ages ago. I was in the I have to squat all the time, and I lifted some stuff, but nothing grew. Nothing. Nothing grew. It was great fun, but nothing happened.
Yeah. So obviously we've not got through too many questions. I'm going to ask one more, which I kind of already know the answer because you mentioned it a few times. Who is your biggest inspiration for training and why? And I'm assuming the answer is going to be Arnie, but.
No, I wouldn't honestly say that. I would say, as my biggest inspiration for me getting me started to work out, and purely from a bodybuilding standpoint, I'd probably say, Arnold, just because, that his touch on the sport is far reaching than any other human being. Right. So for getting people into working out, he's going to be basically like the gateway. If I actually looked at like from a bodybuilder standpoint, I'd say the person that I'm still like the most impressed with. And for me, the GOAT is Dorian Yates, just looking at obviously the things he did, the way he thought, the way he trained. He's probably my favorite bodybuilder of all time, I would say. And then from like from professional standpoint, my biggest mentor is Tom Purvis. So he's the guy who started RTS, and he's probably the one that's cultivated a better thought process in me than anyone. And then honestly, I say too, I always give credit to Ben, to really obviously, the biggest thing I got from him was a good balance of, I did honestly train hard prior to training with Ben, but you realize there's levels to hard training. And so that was a big step up in my ability to train, were the years that I trained with him as well too. And it was good because there were periods of time where both of our training evolved together while training with each other. So in different ways, I'd probably say those are my top 3 or 4. Like again, Arnold for this notion of how I wanted to look, and still perceivably it's just a badass physique, and just, getting me into the sport and liking a lot about the way he did everything as well too. But as education changed, I would say again, Dorian's the bodybuilding mentor. And then again, from things professionally and personally, I'd say that again, Tom Purvis and Ben were 2 of the bigger influences. So.
Solid. So with a mind on the fact that we've been doing this for a while already, what we normally do at the end is, and it's probably going to be easier for you than for most, because this is what you actually do for a living, is basically 5 top tips. So each of our guests, we kind of put them on the spot and say, it doesn't strictly have to be bodybuilding related, but in this case, obviously, generally it will be. 5 tips that you would give to the general person watching this podcast. And again, they can be as functional or as silly as you like, but
they don't have to be good. They don't even have, some of them are even proper shit. Like some.
No, I don't know. Put me on the spot. 5. Honestly, like the number one thing I still always think for people. So number one tip would just be like realistically manage expectations, and realistically like set goals. I don't think anybody actually sets goals, and like spend like I'm guilty of it as well too. Cause like how deep are you from an emotional maturity standpoint when you're like 16? Like, I don't know, for me, like puddle deep, I don't know what the fuck was going on. And so some of it's like, you're just like, I'm like, I want muscles, me want bigger muscles, or like, that's my goal. And then, girls start liking you when you have muscles, like, oh shit, this is definitely nice too. But I think it's really worth your time, looking at what your goals are, spend some time thinking on them, write them down and shit, readdress them and look through them, because as things progress and change and evolve, that will hopefully help you manage your actions better. And because that's the stuff we talked about, where again, like some of our conversations hopefully being helpful is like, do I have to do this exercise? Do I have to do this? And like, now the way the industry is, everyone's like, I want to bodybuild. I want to do a show. It's like, do you really want to? Do you really want to do drugs? Do you really want to do this kind of stuff? And I honestly think some people just don't think. They just like see something superficial and chase after it like fucking dog chasing the car or something. And sometimes people get like halfway after something before they're like, oh man, I don't like this, or this isn't good, or this isn't whatever. It's like, well, maybe you should have thought about that ahead of time. Another one will be it's not a plug because it's free, but I have on YouTube. It's a video that's off of my app. And I think I have the title of something like the secret to muscle building or something, or like the most important video I've ever done. And I honestly tell people, I'm like, watch that video if you want to put on muscle, because again, it actually stems, I quote, kind of half quote JP in the beginning of the video, where one of the things I like at the culture of JP says is, putting on muscle is easy. And then expanding upon it, this notion of like, are you checking your boxes? And that's the whole thing, is the day and age we live in now is people that are just looking for weird, obscure shit, while avoiding the obvious stuff, the obvious simple stuff. That's the most simple stuff on paper, but the hardest stuff to adhere to. And I'm guilty of doing it as well too, even in various degrees of my training is like, I'm looking at these various things, and even competitors are looking at shit like, oh, what should I do? What stack should I take? Ignoring the fact that they're sleeping 5 hours a night and stuff. And I was like, I would not take a drug if you're going to sleep 5 hours a night. Like, I'm not saying you still wouldn't get in better shape and the drugs won't do something, but why the fuck wouldn't you do that part first? So I tell everybody, watch that video and be honest with yourself when you watch that video before you start looking and doing a whole bunch of other shit. What are some other tips? I don't know. What is that? It's 2, but they were rambled. So that's like at least like 2 into like 3.5.
We'll give you 3 on that, I reckon.
Yeah, 3 or whatever, something. And again, well, some of it stems to, let me think with training. Again, this kind of stems from that one, but just write shit down. If there's something I can say that I've done my entire career, I've always had a logbook. I literally found some from the other day from when I was like 15 or 16. And I can't think of a more simple, beneficial practice. And obviously it doesn't have to be written on paper, put it in your phone or whatever, just write something or track something, use an app. I don't care. But I think that's one of the biggest things that people I always tell people like, what do I write down? I was like, I don't know, just figure something out and start writing it down. I was like, it's your logbook, but the whole point is just something you can actually look back at some point in time and say, hey, has anything changed at all in the past like year or 2 years or 5 years? So just write shit down if you're really serious about your goals and serious about your stuff. And again, if I was really being honest, things that would have helped me earlier on, again, I just started training because I liked it. But had I earlier on started writing down my diet and things like that, when I started doing that, which I probably really didn't do till I was in my late 20s, obviously that made a massive change in my physique where I actually just did things structured and progressive if necessary. And the last one, I got a good one. The last one, or 4.5, whatever, is I always say, and I say this.
Oh
no, we just broke
training partner.
Oh no.
Oh no.
That's probably the most important thing. Everyone.
Sorry, can you repeat that one? You broke up just at the bit. You were like, "This is the one," and then it was.
Oh, sorry. The most important thing ever. Bye. See you later. No, what I was gonna say is get a training partner. Yeah. And so at some point in time, and again, it's people will always get butthurt when I say this, and they'll be like, "I train hard. You don't know how I train. I train so hard. I don't need a training partner. I break training partners, and I'm making great progress." And I'm always like, "All right, great. Like you're making great progress. You're probably the biggest guy in your gym that has like 70 members, so it's like, that's not what I'm talking about. If you want to keep progressing your physique, at some point in time, you need a good training partner. And you need someone. I know the thing that I totally get, and people get upset about this, and I actually totally empathize with them because it's horrible. It's like, I can't find anybody. And I was like, all right, that shit's hard. But take some time. I don't know. We can start like a dating app or something for like meatheads looking for like training partners or something. We could fill out like this whole intake first. And are you local? Fucking swipe right. You can look at people's PRs and shit or whatever. And all right, I think I like this. I like where we're at here. And but I honestly, like, that's so important. Just for one, I think so many people waste time like not in, like, that makes everything so much more enjoyable. Like having a training partner, and like I literally remember so many sessions that stick out for having a billion fucking training sessions. I remember the ones where I just murdered people, or people murdered me, or whatever it is. And then the reality is, like, there's this whole thing where it's, as much as I love the individual part of the sport, I mean, it's, and again, I can say this not to be a dick, more qualified than most people, but there's so many levels to this. I've trained with so many people from everything from, everyone wants to say, from natural competitors to enhanced competitors to Olympia people to normal people. And like, there's so many levels that people could still take shit if they really wanted to. And you're not going to find that out by yourself. You know, you need somebody that's going to be right there with you and pushing you. And the other side of that too is some of my favorite time ever training in my life was training by myself. Because some of it, again, is I like the mental component. I like the whole not murdering people. That's good mind space time for me. And there have been times where I like this notion of how far can I push myself, the whole deal when like nobody's looking, you know, there's like, I don't have any single one of my workouts, my first 15 years of training recorded. Did they even exist if I didn't post them? I mean, I like that. I miss the fact that people just did shit because they just would like to see what they're able to hold themselves accountable to. So I get that there's a balance there. And I get the benefits and, you know, perceived cool stuff of both sides. But at the same time is, you know, overall, I will choose having a good training partner as opposed to training myself. Anytime, you know, making progress with my physique is actually important to me. Not just, I want to like not murder people and just feel good.
I think finding a training partner as well, like being a good spotter is an art.
Oh yeah.
Like being as involved, like if I'm training with someone, like as invested in them,
yeah,
you know, as I am myself.
Oh yeah.
And it is so hard to have that two-way street rather than, because I do train people as well. I find it really, really hard not to put all of it in and then you're not necessarily getting it back. Yeah, spotting and stuff is so hard. And sometimes if you get a bad spot and they yank it off you or something, you're like, your head's like boxed and you're like, oh God, you've ruined it. I never want to see you again.
Yep. Yeah, that's basically what I basically say too, man. When I'm training like Terrence, like he's actually using me for like, you know, over the course of a workout, I'm basically just there for 10 reps, like total, you know, it's like, I'm like, we're not at this point in time for how long we've been training. There's no more protractors. There's no more nerding out on shit. There's no more all this kind of stuff where we feeling we got it. And so basically I'm just there. My benefit is for those last reps of a couple of working sets. And like, that's the joke. It's like, right now, I'm just like a really good spotter. Like that's my goal. You know, it sounds funny from the outside. It's like, you just got somebody like a fucking weight monkey taking the weights on and off for you. I'm like, well, I do that. And I was like, but I do have quite the skill set, I think, when it comes to the way that I'm, you know, having him perform those 10 reps per workout or whatever. But that's how that is, I think, the level of importance in it, because that's the thing I give him, you know, now when he's traveling and this and that and trying to get him to not travel. I was like, I hate to be a dick, but I mean, you got to train with me. I'm like, this is where we're making changes in your physique at this point in time. And sometimes obviously you can substitute, which is great, but it's not always easy to find people that are going to be able to do what they need him, what he needs them to do. So
I just don't understand why people aren't going to throw away their whole lives so that they can spot me for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Strange.
Bullshit, really.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to do the bodybuilding thing. I don't care. You've got a job or like a miss. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Who cares? I'm trying to like hit PBs.
Pretty much. Yeah.
It's just there's too many selfish people out there. You see, they should be like, oh, Dan's trying to get massive.
I genuinely think there's something in that training partner app.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%,
man. Yeah.
I'm not going to Google it though because I don't think it's going to be what it seems.
Yeah.
Like,
training for something.
I'm going to sign up, and there's going to be people there, but they're doing a different training.
Yeah, I think people would find that app and start using it for other purposes pretty fast. But,
yeah.
Muscle man searching for other muscular man.
It wouldn't take much to think of something else. Joe, mate, it's been wicked having you on. Thank you so much for giving us your time. It
Absolutely.
really was like, I would just like, fuck it. It's probably not going to happen. So I really appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Time for us, and just keep doing what you're doing, keep putting it out, man. I found it really useful. Like I said, I steal loads of your shit, and you know, you just doing you is the good bit about social media. You did you, and you got a following for being you. It wasn't the other way around.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wish you all the success forever.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's probably been more content in this podcast than in the entire
other 50 episodes.
Yeah, sweet. Well, good. I hope so.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good watch for the people who've been watching it. So yeah, I echo Dan's sentiments, pal. Thank you for taking the time. I'm sure you get a million requests like these. So we're the lucky ones that we're able to get you in. So thank you.
Absolutely, guys.
Cool, man. Take it easy. Big love from
you
the
guys
UK.
as well. Yeah.